Welcome to the Prophecy Club, where we provide information and resources with a prophetic warning message to win souls to Jesus and to call people to repentance. Our topic today is conspiracies exposed by a retired FBI chief. Ted Gunderson was the FBI bureau chief for Southern California. He supervised over 700 personnel, and after his retirement, he investigated a triple murder that opened his eyes to cover-ups and conspiracies. Ted is called by God to reveal the truth about Pearl Harbor, the assassinations of Jack and Bobby Kennedy, the Ruby Ridge and Waco incidents, and the bombings of Oklahoma City in 9/11. He's also going to tell you what is coming with no trial incarcerations, no right to an attorney, government snitches, more camera monitoring, non-warranted wiretapping, national ID card tracking devices for people, cell phones, and every financial transaction. Will you help me welcome Ted Gunderson?
Hey, thank you, Stan. God bless you, my friend. It's great to be here again. I was here some 10 years ago, as I recall, and it's a great experience then. It's a great experience now. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate very much Stan bringing me back. I have some very strong messages for you, and I want you to listen to them and absorb them and pass them on to your friends, okay? I started out, after I retired, I opened my own investigative firm, and my first major investigation was the Dr. Jeffrey R. MacDonald case. That's spelled M-A-C-D-O-N-A-L-D. Dr. MacDonald, at the time, was a Green Beret doctor at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and shortly after I retired, as I said, I was contacted by some of his friends who said that Dr. MacDonald had been tried and convicted of the triple murder of his wife and two children. Colette was pregnant, the two children, 2.5 and 5.5, and they said that he was innocent, absolutely innocent, and they asked me if I would investigate the case. I said, yes, I will. If the man is innocent, I'll continue to work the case. If he's guilty, I will not work that case. I went out to Terminal Island, which is a federal correction institute, San Pedro, California, and I talked to Dr. MacDonald, and I said the same thing to Dr. MacDonald. I said, if you're innocent, I'm with you. It was then that I went out and started my investigation. I went to North Carolina during January 1980. Spent the whole month there. And long story short, within 10 months, on October 25, 1980, as a matter of fact, I ended up obtaining a signed confession from a girl named Helena Stokely. She said that Dr. MacDonald did not commit those murders. They were committed by her satanic cult group. And of course, I had heard about Satan in the Bible, and I knew about the spiritual problem with Satan, but I didn't realize the extent of the satanic movement in the country today. And of course, I was just introduced to it then. Now, I know so much, it's absolutely unbelievable. It's mind-boggling. So that was when I first was exposed to these nefarious type activities by the satanic cults across America. Anyway, Helena gave me this statement, and I said to Helena, I said, what's the motive for the cover-up, Helena? And Helena said, well, there is at that time, and there was, of course, at the time of the murders, February 17th, 1970, there was a large-scale drug operation being operated by elements, a rogue element within the government out of Southeast Asia. Actually, they were flying, meaning this element, this rogue element, were flying plastic drugs in plastic bags in the body cavities of the dead GIs into various bases all over America. And in particular, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Lenny told me there were 2 generals involved. There were Army personnel, Army officers, police officers, and 2 local attorneys in Fayetteville, North Carolina. This was the reason for the cover-up, according to Helena. Now, the government had an opportunity to talk to Helena. She tried to give a confession. They refused. I was the one that obtained the first signed confession from her, as I said, in October 1980. From there, I went public. I was on numerous radio, TV shows across America, and people came from all over the country, calling me on the phone, writing me letters, telling me about satanic cults. And I'm saying to myself, if somebody from New England tells me the same story as somebody from California and Texas and Montana and Nebraska and Kansas. There must be something to this. And I was receiving this information across America, all basically the same information. I'm saying there's something to this. And that's when I woke up. So it was a combination of realizing that there was a large-scale satanic movement in this country, coupled with a cover-up by the government in Fort Bragg. And that's when I'm saying, hey, what's going on here? And being a professional investigator, of course, I kept on going and kept on working. Now, in my research, subsequent to the McDonald investigation, by the way, Dr. McDonald today, this day, is still in prison. We've had hearings. My confession from Alina Stokely has been presented to the courts. It's been ignored. The latest information on Dr. McDonald, in 1997, now this is 2007, folks, 1997, the judge ordered DNA tests. The DNA tests have been conducted. And according to information that we have on the defense team, it will exonerate Dr. McDonald. Yet the judge refuses to hold a hearing and to provide this information not only to the public but to the world. So we have additional problems with a cover-up of some sort. So anyway, that's when I said, hey, what's going on here? And that's when I started doing my research. And I did my own research, by the way. I'm a rather unique individual because I've not only researched these topics, I've been in the street. I've been so-called in the gutter and worked them. So I'm a combination of investigator and researcher. Now you say, well, so what? You know, well, I'm a former FBI chief. I'm not just some guy with a grocery bag or grocery cart full of tin cans looking for a recycling center, okay? No, I'm not. I have credibility, in spite of the fact that the government would like to think I don't have credibility. But I have refused for the last 27 years to buckle in, to take any indication that I'm going to back off. And in fact, I will refuse to back off. Because as a result of being involved in these issues, I realize it has to be brought out to the American people. So that's when I started doing some research. And I went all the way back to Pearl Harbor. I talked to a fellow named Ralph Briggs, who was a naval officer in Washington, D.C. on December the 4th, 1941. We had broken the Japanese code. We received a cryptic message that the Japanese code had been broken. The Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor on December the 7th. So we had this information in advance. He told me that he took the information off the wire. He gave it to his supervisor. The supervisor took it. He didn't hear anything more about it until after the war was over. After the war was over, Congress issued a subpoena for him. They were investigating Pearl Harbor. His superior officer said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the subpoena. Don't even answer it. And later on, you'll find out why. He never answered it, and he never testified before Congress. This is interesting information, of course. And this is when I'm saying to myself, well, that's just one thing. What about the others? Jack Kennedy's assassination, 1963, Dallas, Texas. Okay, Jack Kennedy, 10 days before he was shot, said he was going, he announced to the government, to the world actually, that he was going to revamp our government. Now what that meant, probably, I'm not sure for sure if he ever specifically made this statement, but that would mean going back on the gold standard probably, and he was talking about streamlining or revamping the CIA and some of these other alphabet agencies, and then 10 days later he was shot and killed. Based on my research, you know, when I was in the FBI, I defended the government's position on that, the Warren Commission, all the way because I thought that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone assassin. He was not the lone assassin. My research since I retired indicates and establishes without any doubt there was a rogue element in the government, probably the CIA, who was involved in the assassination along with the Chicago Mafia. For example, Sam Giancana, head of the Chicago mob, was subpoenaed to Washington, D.C. to testify in the Warren Commission report and for the Warren Commission Committee. 3 days before he was to go to Washington, D.C. to testify, he was shot and killed, murdered. There's no question about it. There was more than Lee Harvey Oswald at the Jack Kennedy assassination. Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy was shot and killed in Los Angeles at the Ambassador Hotel. There were 11 bullet holes in the walls and the doors, yet Saran's gun would only hold 8 bullets. So there's 3 bullets unaccounted for. Daryl Gates, chief of police, later on, not at that time, wrote a book and tried to explain about the 3 extra bullet holes. I read it. It doesn't make sense. It's not plausible, and it's not right. It's not accurate. There were more shooters there than Saran. Saran, by the way, in my opinion, based on my analysis, is probably a mind control victim. A program known as MK Ultra. I'll get into that a little later on in my lecture. Ruby Ridge. Randy Weaver was asked to be an informant for the BATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. He refused. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms sent one of their informants in, sold him a shotgun that was an inch too short by regulations and by law, and they used that to arrest him. He refused to appear at his hearing, and a bench warrant was issued for his arrest. As a result, of course, we had Ruby Ridge. We had his wife shot and killed by Horiuchi, FBI agent Horiuchi. The locals wanted to try Horiuchi for murder. They were prevailed from doing that by the government, and the FBI refused to try him also. We had Waco then. I'm taking a series of steps, by the way. I'm going back and I'm coming forward. And then I'm going to get into today, what's happening right today. At Waco, we had like 80 people murdered by the government, women and children. Some of the women and children were shot trying to escape out of the fire. I did some research on the 4 BATF agents who were shot and killed there. Now you recall, I'm sure, that there are a number of Branch Davidians who are serving life in prison for the murder of these 4 BATF agents. In my research, I learned that all 4 were shot in the head. Now, for those of you who have been in the military, you know what that is. That's a sniper shot. There's no other explanation for it. There's no way that those Branch Davidians could have shot all 4 of them in the head. One of the BATF agents, the trajectory of the bullet was from above, down through his lip, and into his body from above. You recall, I'm sure, from watching film, that there were some government helicopters there. Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City was not committed alone by Tim and by Larry Nichols. There were other people involved. I'm going to go more into Oklahoma City in a few minutes. McVeigh, of course, Timothy McVeigh. As a matter of fact, he wrote a letter to his sister that before Oklahoma City, he had been recruited by the CIA to work for the CIA on the assassination teams and also to work in the CIA drug operation. Our government's involved in this international scale drug operation. And the CIA's involved, there's no question about it. That's been well documented. During the period that Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas, they were flying, our government was flying, Iran-Contra and so forth, flying drugs into Mena, Arkansas, and munitions and arms out. I have interviews that I've taken with CIA pilots, drug pilots. Bo Abbott's one. Also, I have an interview that I have conducted with Chip Tatum, who was a 25-year black ops operator for the CIA. But I'll go into more into detail on Oklahoma City in just a few minutes. And then, of course, I got a little out of synced on my dates, but in '93, February 26, 1993, we had the World Trade Center car bombing. In that case, the government had an informant in among the terrorists, Salam, and he was very wise because he was given a body mic, to record his conversations with the terrorists. And when he had his conversations with his FBI superiors and handlers, unknown to the FBI, he recorded his conversations with them, and it probably saved him from going to prison along with the terrorists. Long story short, the FBI was told in advance by Salam that they were going to use a car bomb. He was commissioned by the terrorists to put this bomb together. He says to his superiors, FBI handlers, "We're going to use a dummy bomb, aren't we?" They said, "No, we're going to use a real bomb." So basically, the FBI not only knew in advance of the car bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993, they furnished the ingredients for the bomb. And then we have 9/11, and I'll go much more into detail on 9/11 later on in my lecture. But going back very briefly to Oklahoma City, I forgot to mention, and I will go in more detail also on Oklahoma City, that there were, according to one of the defense investigators who talked to me, there were at least 11 other people involved in Oklahoma City. Now, where does this lead us? Well, let me just tell you, based on my 28 years experience and my research, I have determined there are thousands of victims who have been targeted by an illegal U.S. government rogue criminal enterprise that is active 24 hours a day throughout the United States. A wet network of victims who work with me have reached the same conclusion based on 1, their personal experiences, 2, the sufficient number of victims, and 3, the extent and intensity of the harassment. It is far too active to be operated and controlled by private enterprise. Private enterprise goals are to achieve financial gain. These operations require extensive financing to operate with no return on the investment. I believe these programs are financed through illegal black operations such as drugs, prostitution, black operations involving gambling, kidnapping children who are auctioned off as sex slaves, and I'll go into that more later in my lecture. And these children are also used as human sacrifices and also for body parts. And I'll go into more detail about the number of children who disappear in this country every hour. I believe this well-sophisticated, well-organized operation has a central command. This is all my opinion right now, but I'm very confident of it because based on, as I said, my experience. Has a central command located somewhere in the United States with multiple satellite offices scattered throughout the country. It appears those who administer the program can call on any location in the U.S. for surveillance, a telephone tap, or other activity and harassment directed at a victim, and immediately dispense a manpower to the same scene that the victim is. This well-greased covert operation makes the old FBI COINTELPRO program look like a Sunday school class. You recall all the criticism of the FBI about the COINTELPRO program. I personally, by the way, was involved in Connecticut in the COINTELPRO program. Now, I can document that the government has the expertise, the finance, and the manpower to effectively administer such a program. To understand why and how a black ops criminal enterprise by this rogue element targets an individual, it is necessary, 1, to identify the victim. Number 2, outline the reasons the victim is targeted. And 3, document and identify the weapons and the tactics being directed against him or her. I will do this in my lecture using myself as an example as a victim. Believe me, I am a victim. Well, I just covered Pearl Harbor, Kennedy assassination. I'm a little ahead of myself. So let's go on to, this is the newspaper article on the 1993 car bombing. This is the documentation that the FBI knew in advance and could have prevented the bombing, but they did not. They furnished ingredients for the bomb. And here I am the victim, and the reasons I'm targeted. Well, I had my own radio show for 2 hours back in the 1990s. And in my radio show, I emphasized corruption and exposed satanic cults. I've given hundreds of lectures throughout the United States exposing corruption and satanic activity, including 16 lectures that are scheduled to be given in the immediate future for the Prophecy Club, a great organization, ladies and gentlemen. You've got to support the Prophecy Club. We need to keep Mr. Stan Johnson and his beautiful wife going and getting the word out. And I'm, again, thankful that they have asked me to participate in this DVD. I've been on dozens of national TV shows, including Geraldo, Unsolved Mysteries, Discovery, Court TV, Larry King Live, CNN, and others, exposing corruption and Satanism. I have been involved in, of course, the confession of Dr. McDonald, and I've exposed a large-scale drug operation there. This is all well documented in my reports. It's available to you, by the way. I have produced and distributed hundreds of DVD interviews with covert CIA agents. I mentioned Chip Tatum and Bo Abbott a few moments ago. I prevented a terrorist attack from occurring in the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. I investigated the Tulare, California Police Department, exposed corruption, drugs, and a frame-up involving individuals who were in prison in the Central California area. I've identified a fellow named William Menser, a satanic contract killer, as one of the Son of Sam murders in the New York City triple murder case. It was more than triple murder, it was a series of murders. I've documented and exposed the Finders. The Finders is a CIA covert child kidnapping ring that for years, from the 1960s until 1987, when it was exposed in U.S. News and World Report, was involved in the actual kidnapping of children, and I'll go more into that later in my lecture here today. I've continued to work on the Franklin cover-up case. I became involved in the Franklin cover-up case in the late 1980s, and I'll go more into that. In the Franklin cover-up case, there was a satanic element in the Midwest, mainly Omaha, Nebraska, that was flying children from Omaha, taking them out of foster homes, orphanages, and Boys Town, driving them to Sioux City, Iowa, 184 miles away, and flying them to Washington, D.C. for sex orgies with congressmen and senators. I was responsible for discovering and documenting tunnels that run to the McMartin Preschool. That case involved the McMartin Preschool in Manhattan Beach, California. The parents would drop the children off, 2-, 3-, 4-year-old children, preschool, in the morning, come back and pick them up after work at night, because mother and father are both working. And during that period, the children were being molested. And the children said that they were taken into tunnels under the school, up into a trap door of a triplex next door, taken out of the triplex, it was in the bathroom, the trap door was, and placed in automobiles and prostituted in the community. 2-, 3-, 4-year-old children prostituted. How sick can you get? They had a 2-year trial trying on the McMartins. The grandmother who owned the school was acquitted. Ray Buckey, the son, had a hung jury. And in the middle of the second trial is when I discovered, by the way, with the UCLA archaeologist, Dr. Gary Stickle, I had access to the school. I gained access to the school. I heard it was being sold to a contractor who was going to build an office building there. And I went to him and I said, "Sir, I want to have access to that building." And he gave it to me, providing I'd assume liability. And I had a lawyer friend of mine draw up a contract, and it was very official. And we went in there with Dr. Gary Stickle. Within 34 days, in fact, on the 34th day, Dr. Stickle said Yes, I can document there were tunnels under this school. The children said there were tunnels under the school. The authorities didn't believe it. They claimed it was not true. We found the tunnels under the school, the trap door under the triplex next door. We have pictures of the trap door, by the way. In the middle of the second trial, I called the district attorney's office. They sent an investigator out named Perez. I met him at the curbside. I said, let's go in. I want you to talk to the archaeologist. There's tunnels under this school. He said, I don't want you in the meeting. I said, why not? He says, you're too argumentative. Well, we'll see. So I let him go in to see Dr. Stickle, and I waited a few minutes, and then I went on in. And he was in there, an investigator who's not an expert in archaeology is telling a doctor who's an archaeologist that there's no tunnels there. We had tunnels there. The children were telling the truth. Basically, the family got away with that. So that was, and of course it involved, again, satanic cults. And then I personally investigated Oklahoma City bombing, which I'll go into more in detail in a few minutes. I documented, and I can document, and I'll go into this more in detail, that the FBI was furnished advanced information about terrorist activity, which included, if they'd investigated it, 911. They were furnished this information March the 20th, 2001, 6 months prior to 911. I've investigated numerous other cases, homicides, and other matters which involve cover-up by officials, including the Jerry Winder murder by a California Highway Patrolman in Red Bluff, California, the Victor Galustian murder in Los Angeles by a group of Iranian terrorists, and I'll go in more into that in detail in my lecture, and a Marine Captain Jerry Digman, homicide involved. He was investigating a homicide investigation inside the U.S. Marines in Camp Pendleton, California. Involved a huge cover-up by the U.S. Navy again. And a David Chase murder in Colorado involving drugs and child pornography. David ran across this operation by his next-door neighbor. He was found, he disappeared. He was found several months later in the river. His hand had been severed, his neck had been broken. And the most recent one is a Virginia Clement homicide in the Kaiser Hospital, Woodland Hills, California. I have to mention this with caution because the family just had a settlement on that case. In my professional opinion, she was murdered. Now, because of my work, I've had attempts on my life by gunmen waiting for me on several occasions. Then I learned through the Freedom of Information Act that I had 3 separate investigations on me, looking toward prosecution, of course. They described me in one of the reports, by the way, and I have to get a kick out of this, as Gunderson is armed and dangerous. Well, he is armed and dangerous. He's armed and dangerous with the word of Christ, okay? And you better watch out because that's the way it is, whether you like it or not, okay? And then I also I was contacted by DEA, actually Pam Fawcett, a girl. When they were unsuccessful in prosecuting me, they assigned a girl named Pam Fawcett on me to try to set me up on a drug operation. And Pam finally came over to me after 6 months and told me about the operation. I'll go more into that later on. She passed a polygraph test, gave me a signed statement. This did not work because I'm an honest man. And I asked her, why did you, Pam, come over to my side? And I said, how do I know? And how can I prove and how can you prove that you're telling me the truth? She said, well, in one of the telephone conversations she had with me, the agent had written out handwritten notes, and she kept them. He never did take them back. And she gave me those handwritten notes. So there's no question about it. And I said, well, why did you come over to my side? She said, I woke up the other morning and I realized you're the only honest person I've talked to in the last 6 months. So most recently, then of course I've been a victim of an extensive disinformation program by FBI informants, Stu Webb and Barbara Hartwell, the CIA informant. This is all documented. As a matter of fact, on Stu Webb, I'll go more into him a little later on, but I can prove that he is an FBI informant, and I will prove it. And most recently in Las Vegas, I had to move, well, more recently within the last year, I had to move from Las Vegas to a small town in Nebraska, 296 people, because I was being gassed. I was under extensive and intensive surveillance, and I had to move in order to protect myself. I have laboratory reports to prove that I was poisoned with arsenic and cyanide. And as a matter of fact, I think, and I can't prove this, but I think one of the things, I've always had a normal blood pressure, 120/70. And as a result of this poison that was pumped into my condominium in Las Vegas and also into my car, 2 needle marks, I can take you to my car right now, 2 needle marks between the door and the door frame where they pump poison in there. And what it does, I believe, this poison, it raises my blood pressure. And it was so serious and so bad that I had to go to the hospital on one occasion. And at one time, my blood pressure was 252/119. Well, what that does, if you don't correct it, you're going to have a heart attack or stroke. So instead of blowing you away with gunmen, putting you in prison, being able to take other nefarious activity against me, I figured that that's the latest technique and latest attempt to get rid of me. Didn't work. Didn't work because of divine intervention, very honestly, and I'll go into that later on. I've received threatening phone calls. I've received threatening letters. I've been burglarized in my home on numerous occasions. Thieves have stolen my research. My apartment window has been shot out twice, and I continue to have security problems even though I did move to this small town in Nebraska. The surveillance is kind of interesting because in some of the surveillance, these people are cowards. And you get in a car, and if you spot them, you get in a car and you start chasing them. They just get out of town in a hurry. As a matter of fact, back in about the probably middle or late 1980s, I lived in Long Beach, California. And I had several occasions, two occasions, when somebody was sitting in a car a quarter of a block away just sitting there. And I knew what it was. He was a dirtbag Satanist, as far as I'm concerned. If you don't mind calling them dirtbags, because that's what they are. So I put on my gun, got in my car, and drove by 3 miles an hour, stared him down, did a U-turn, 3 miles an hour, stared him down, did that about 3 or 4 times, then I parked in behind him, just sat there and looked at him in the rearview mirror. Well, it didn't take long for them to button down the hatch and take off. One fellow ran through a red light getting away from me. Another one went back down a one-way street the wrong direction to get away from me. And then another one, I came out one night at midnight. I was walking my dog. I was living with my daughter at the time. I was walking the dog. I saw a fellow about a quarter of a block up sitting there in a car. It was dark, of course. And I took the dog in, put my gun on, went up, and I had my pen and paper with me. I walked around in front of the car, looked him over, walked around the back of the car, wrote down the license number, walked up to the side of the door where the driver was, and I said, "Let me see your driver's license." He says, "What for?" He said, I know who you guys are. I want to see your driver's license." And by this time, he's like an octopus locking all his doors. He says, "No." And he says, No, I'm waiting for somebody." I said, "Yeah, I've heard that story before." Well, just about then, I heard a door open across the street, and his friend who he was waiting for did come out. And I said, "You know, sir, I'm sorry. I made a mistake." But you do have a little amusement on occasion on some of these matters. So in Nebraska, I've continued to have a few little surveillance problems. But I mentioned now earlier about the McDonald case. So this is when I woke up, this is what I said. I'm a little out of order, but you know, I can move around a little bit. A little maneuvering. As long as I cover all the points, folks. This is an article that appeared in the Time magazine, January 1, 1973. This is your documentation that they were shipping drugs in plastic bags in the body cavities of our dead GIs coming out of Vietnam. What a horrible thing to do. These brave soldiers who were sent over there not to fight for the country. They're sent over there because men in suits in Washington, D.C. send America's best and finest off to be killed. It's absolutely disgusting. Now we have that situation in Iran and Iraq, excuse me. Then the Franklin cover-up. That was an interesting case because in the late 1980s, I was called, by a fellow named Ed Weaver, who had a potato chip company in Lincoln, Nebraska. I lived in California at the time, Los Angeles. And Ed said to me, I read your name in a book. He read my name in the book called The Ultimate Evil by Maury Terry, which was the son of Sam, murders in New York City. Are you the same Ted Gunderson who went to the University of Nebraska? And I said, yes. He said, well, I'm Ed Weaver. I said, oh, Ed Weaver. His father and my father were friends. My dad had a parts business right down the street from Ed Weaver's potato chip factory. And I was a friend of Ed Weaver's from high school and college. And I said, yes. He says, well, we got a problem. I'm head of the Nebraska Leadership School, Leadership Conference it was, and we need an investigator. So I went back at his request to Nebraska from Los Angeles. There was a state senator named John DeCamp, and there was suspicion cast upon him. I started investigating the case. I exonerated John DeCamp. He's a wonderful man, outstanding citizen. And again, he later on wrote the Franklin cover-up book, which I highly recommend to you. And basically the story involved a large-scale satanic operation in the Midwest. It involved ties to Washington, D.C. It involved a mind control program into Offutt Air Force Base, which was SAC headquarters, right out of Omaha. And it was going full bore. And it was being ignored by officials. People refused to investigate it, the law enforcement agencies. The FBI, according to John DeCamp, was the one agency that prevented the investigation from going forward. And as a matter of fact, on chapter 14 of the Franklin cover-up book, it very well documents that. So long story short, there was considerable developed evidence. Actually, there were photographs that it was learned involving sexual exploitation of children, pedophilia, and other sexual activities. And there was $1 million lawsuit. John DeCamp's client, Paul Benassi, filed $1 million lawsuit against a fellow named Larry King, a black man, not Larry King Live. And Larry King had established the Franklin Savings and Loan in a minority neighborhood in Omaha for the purpose of servicing the minorities. And it was actually used as a cover. Some of the leading businessmen in Omaha were on the board of directors. Harold Anderson, past publisher of the Omaha World Herald, was on the board of directors. The chief of police was identified. Anderson was identified by the children, by the way, as involved in these activities. Bob Wadman, the chief of police, was identified as involved in these type of activities. The head of the society page of the Omaha World Herald, the heir to the Brandeis fortune, a fellow named Eugene Mahoney, who was a past vice cop for the Omaha Police Department and then head of the Nebraska Forestry Service. These people are all identified in this satanic movement, in this activity, flying these kids to D.C., sex orgies and so forth. So what happened? Nothing, other than the fact that John DeCamp did obtain a $1 million settlement by Paul Benassi, who was one of the victims. Paul had been sexually molested. He had been used as a decoy. These people were involved in the Finders child kidnapping ring. And Paul was used on the kidnappings to go to shopping malls, parks, and so forth, to track children his same age, 12, 14, 13, 14 years over to where the adults were, and so the adults could grab the kids, throw them in the back of the car, and be off with them. One of these kidnappings was the Johnny Gosch kidnapping in 1982. Paul Benassi was actively involved in that. They took little Johnny Gosch to a safe house in Sioux City, Iowa. They kept him there for several days. He ended up going out to Colorado, according to Paul Benassi. Paul Benassi was turned state's evidence on him. And he was later identified as possibly being a person named Jeff Gannon, who was supposedly a newspaper reporter in and out of the White House on some 200 occasions without ever having been checked out by the Secret Service. And somebody did a little research on him, because he was asking soft questions of the president in the press conferences, and they found out that this Jeff Gannon had a homosexual website. So this is your documentation of the homosexual prostitution probe, and this is in the Washington Times. And incidental to the Nebraska Franklin cover-up case, Yorkshire TV in England came over with a camera crew for 7 months and produced a documentary on the Franklin cover-up. And it was to be aired and listed to be aired in the TV guide to be aired on the Discovery Channel on May the 3rd, 1994. John DeCamp saw the TV guide that had this listed in it. It was never aired. So here several years ago, I ordered the TV guide for May the 3rd, 1994. You see here it says Balance of Nature, not Conspiracy of Silence. Conspiracy of Silence was absolutely, even though it was printed in the book at one time, they had to reprint all these books in order to cover this up. So not to be outdone by these people, I went to the Philadelphia Inquirer, May the 3rd, 1994. You can see it's listed in the Philadelphia Inquirer TV guide. Then I went to the LA Times. I figure if it's on the East Coast, it's got to be on the West Coast, right? There it is, Conspiracy of Silence. I've been selling this Conspiracy of Silence on my website, and I've sold probably 300 or 400 of them over the last 10 or 15 years. And recently I received a letter from Granada International, London, England. And they told me that the Conspiracy of Silence documentary belonged to them, and I better quit selling it, copying it, producing it, and selling it, or they're going to sue me. So I don't sell it anymore. But I understand that other people picked up on it and have, it is available on the internet. It's possible that you can get it right off the internet directly. National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Washington, D.C. Well, this ties into the Finders, the CIA covert child kidnapping ring. Not directly, because in my opinion, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is a front. And the reason I say that, they've been in operation for some 25 years. They're an adjunct to the U.S. Department of Justice. They've been in operation for some 25 years. As of the fall of 2005, they had located 139 children. And the previous year, they had taken in donations totaling $49 million. It's interesting because I charted some of the flyers, these are the flyers that are sent out all over the country, that were being sent out as to the date that the victims, I'm going to go back and I'll come back to that in a minute. I charted the number of months and the number of times that a person, these children have been kidnapped. And I had 94 of these flyers. And I learned from charting these 94 flyers that half of those, 47, the children had disappeared in the months of June, October, and December. Those are the three major holidays of the satanic movement. June the 21st is the summer solstice, October is Halloween, and December is the winter solstice. So I found that rather interesting that this is the case, but it's well documented, and I'll show that to you in a minute. These are some of the satanic holidays, and of course this is part of the movement that involved the Franklin cover-up case in Nebraska. And you see the summer solstice and these other, here's Halloween, December 22nd. And then in addition to there's 8 basic holidays where they sacrifice human beings. And there are between 50 and 60,000 humans who are sacrificed every year by the Satanists. I have that from 3 different sources. Ex-Satanists in 2 instances, and a priest in a penitentiary in another instance. So let's continue with some of the other satanic holidays. Here's January, February, March, April, May, June. Now we're coming into June the 9th, and the summer solstice also. Now we go back to May. We have the 25th is the full moon. That's coming up. June, July, August, September. September is a very active month. October, November. And December, the winter solstice. Again, December. Other ritual dates. The most important ritual date for the Satanists is their birthday, by the way. Each one individual's birthday. And these are other ritual dates. They're involved in human sacrifices. Aleister Crowley wrote a book. He wrote 2 books that I've read, Magic and Theory and Practice and The Law is for All. And he tells about the most effective and the best human to sacrifice is a young child, because they're more pure than an adult. And he also talks about rape. It's all right to rape somebody under certain circumstances, because you may be emancipating them. This is all documented in their books. So you can see there are many lives that are lost each year, every day, and many more animals are lost. They sacrifice animals like they're going out of style, by the way. Women and children are raped and tortured, drugged, burned, and carved. Some are tattooed with very tiny marks that can only be seen with a black light. Every orifice is a potential for intrusion with human, animal, and other objects. Ritual may include drugging, sexual activity, butchering, fire, mockery of Christian practices, as within baptism, blood and mixture of blood and or urine and feces, communion with blood and or urine, and eating flesh and or organs, parts for the bread. Also, birthing into Satanism may be done by placing the child inside a cow and pulling her out. They may also use to cut off a teat to sucking. Some parts are kept for the further use, bones and other body parts. The disposition of bodies, animal and human, include consumption at the site, burning, burying in an existing grave, burying and pouring lye or other caustic chemicals over the parts, leaving for the coyotes, preserved for shipment elsewhere, are kept or for other use later. Some are taken to rendering plants, some are taken to restaurants, some are dumped in outhouses and covered with chemicals. Dumps or landfilled, buried in between cement blocks at a building site, buried under cement. They have very creative imagination. By the way, I might mention, the more clean the site, the less the evidence, the higher level and more practiced the Satanists. Often parts are mutilated, animals are taken to another site for the ritual. I might mention, I'm going to come to John Van Meter in just a few minutes. That's a very interesting case. That the sacrifices are very common, as I said, 50 to 60,000 per year, and every time, and they're also involved in a number of homicides, by the way. Now, invariably, when they do a crime, they always leave some sort of a subliminal message. And I know there was a satanic murder in North Dakota here quite a few years ago. There's a lot of blood involved, and 666 was on the wall. John Van Meter case. I had a call from John Van Meter here not too long ago. John is a woodsman out of Wisconsin. That's his business. He's also a an author, an amateur author, I guess. I don't think he's had anything published yet, but he wants to write, likes to write, and wants to publish one of his books, a book. John went to a conference in California, in Sonoma County, California. For those of you who are familiar with the Bohemian Grove, and that ties into the Franklin cover-up case, by the way, every summer, our leading world leaders, mainly U.S. leaders, meet at the Bohemian Grove in Sonoma County, California, and they have a mock ceremony, satanic ceremony, human sacrifice ceremony. And anyway, this Sonoma County is noted for this particular Bohemian Grove activity and operation. Anyway, John Van Meter is in the woods in Sonoma County, and he notices a caravan of 20 or 30 people coming in, and all dressed in black, and they have a girl that's nude, young lady that's nude, looks like she's around 19 or 20 years old. And he didn't think much of it at first, and then he left, and he came back. He says, you know, this isn't right. And when he came back, somebody started shooting at him. Well, being a woodsman, he had his .45 semi-automatic with him, and he took it out of his car, and he engaged in a gun battle. And he realized at that point that he was involved, and it interrupted a satanic human sacrifice. Long story short, he shot and killed 4 of them, and he chased the leader into the woods. This is his story, where they had an exchange of information, and the leader of the operation made this statement. He said, I have a get out of jail free, and he said, we own the cops here and the FBI. And he also told him, if you do anything to me, if you kill me, you'll end up the rest of your life in a 10-by-10 cell. So what John did, he chased him out, and he ended up getting the best of the satanic leader, and he shot him. It was defense, self-defense all the way around. In the meantime, the girl jumped in one of the cars. She was nude, and drove out of the area. And John learned later that she drove to Oakland, California, dumped the car, and had her brother come pick her up. He looked in the black pocket, hip pocket of this individual, this leader of the satanic cults, and there was a telephone number there. It was a 202 area code, which, by the way, is Washington, D.C. And also listed on there was a restaurant called Garinthus, G-A-R-I-N-T-H-E-S, Greek restaurant, New York City. And so he called that number. And a female voice, according to him, answered, Federal Bureau of Investigation. He called that number the next day, and the number had been disconnected. This is his story now. And the restaurant address, by the way, was 461 Lambrave, Lambrave Street in New York City. John later learned there was no such address in New York City. So he reported the shooting. He was shot by himself, by the way, by 2 different weapons. And he reported the shooting to the police in Sonoma County. He also went to the newspapers, gave them his coat. The coat had bullet holes in it. And he went home. This was in Halloween of 2004, by the way. A year and a half later, he's working in Wisconsin in the woods, and 2 individuals show up, and he has another gun battle with these 2 individuals. He said he knocked one of them down. They had body armor on, obviously. Twice, he knocked the other one down 4 times, and he also got shot again. And they finally ended up taking off. He learned through one of his sources that they went to a doctor in Chicago And he later somehow or other obtained the cell number of one of the shooters and talked to him on the telephone. And he learned that the one fellow, Satanist, had died in Chicago, and the other individual was going to drive him back to Colorado, and he planned to go into the woods for himself and die. He figured he was not going to make it. In fact, the doctor supposedly told him, "You need medical help right away," and of course they would refuse to go to receive medical treatment because there'd be too many questions asked. So he reported to the police in California, reported to the police in Wisconsin. The police in California, in spite of the fact that he was shot several times with different weapons, John, filed a report on him, charging him with a felony for filing false information. And he had to hire an attorney. He was afraid to go to trial because he's afraid of a corrupt jury and a corrupt judge. So he paid him $10,000 fine and a suspended sentence. Wisconsin is in the process of prosecuting him also for filing a false report, and his trial comes up in June sometime. So I found that a rather interesting case. I probably am going to testify at the trial in June. So these satanic activities are common. I'm telling you, it's as I said earlier, there's probably 4 million of them throughout the United States. That's conservative. And I came up with this 4 million figure because one of my informants in South Bay, California, told me that there's 3,000 in that area, 200,000 population. Lincoln, Nebraska, another source told me there's 3,000, 200,000 population. Iowa City, Iowa, a third source told me Iowa City's 100,000 people, that there's 1,500 there. So if you project that figure, it's about 1.5% of the population in the United States. They're a beckoning force. They've infiltrated virtually every level of society. You know that the newspapers have been infiltrated, and I'll prove that in just a few minutes. So they're active, they're out there. Nobody seems to want to investigate them. A few of us are trying to expose them and will continue to expose them at the cost, of course, of some personal problems, which I don't mind because I can seem to be able to handle it myself with the good Lord's help through divine intervention. In 1996, here's another little matter that I decided to do, which I'm sure is very irritating to the politicians and to the government. I decided to run for president of the United States. Now, I don't want any of you to laugh, okay? Because I did it, and I don't care what happens. It was fun. It was great. Not that I necessarily expected to win. But you know, I'd always been a registered Republican, and I said, I'm going to register Democrat because Clinton was in office then, and I'm going to go to these rallies and represent myself as a conservative in the Democratic Party. I contacted the head of I was living in Las Vegas at the time. I contacted the head of the Democratic Party in Las Vegas and asked if they would support me, and she told me plain blank, no, we're not going to support you. Well, why would they support me, of course, you know, with my attitude and my approach and my conservative approach and my conservative beliefs. So I learned then that in order to register just for the primary alone costs $100,000 just to register for the primary, not to mention the general election. I registered in New Hampshire, which was the first primary in the country, for $1,000. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough money to fly back there to campaign, but in spite of that, I came in 11th out of 21 candidates. And I called the ABC affiliate in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I said to the lady, it was on a Thursday, I want to know what primetime costs Sunday night before the Tuesday election. And she said it's $20,000, $10,000 an hour. I said, thank you very much. She called me back Friday. What are you going to run? I said, well, I'm going to run a documentary called Clinton Chronicles. And for those of you who don't know about the Clinton Chronicles, it's a story about drugs coming into Mena, Arkansas, the corrupt Clinton administration in Arkansas, and of course some of his nefarious activities since he's president. I received a call back on Monday. This was, Tuesday was not the election, but it was several weeks before the election. And she said, by the way, Mr. Gunderson, I just want to tell you that we made a mistake in quoting the price. It wasn't $20,000, it was $120,000. Of course, I wasn't able to get the Clinton Chronicles run on the ABC station there in Manchester, New Hampshire. But I thought if I could get that Clinton Chronicles on the air, it might make a difference in the whole election. So anyway, from there, like I say, I couldn't get back to New Hampshire. Finances were tight. I had a friend of mine, since I used to be in charge of the FBI in Dallas, Texas, I called a friend of mine and asked him if he would donate $2,500 to register me in the state of Texas. And he did. So I went to Texas, I campaigned for 3 weeks, and I came in 5th as a candidate with over 15,500 votes. So I did very well there. And there was a former state legislator, a lady that was very nice, Myra Dipple out of Tyler, Texas, who I'd met her in a conference in Washington, D.C. when I went there in connection with the American Free Press, which is a fantastic magazine in Washington. And Myra, being a former state legislator, took me around the state and introduced me to various individuals. It was a great experience. And I had a rally in, I think it was Beaumont, Texas. And Bob Gebhardt was there, the congressman from St. Louis. And usually they'd let me give a few comments. In this particular case, nobody, the master of ceremonies refused to let me comment. He only introduced Gebhardt and one other candidate. And there were about 5 or 6 of us there who were candidates in the primary. And afterwards, the judge, who was a master of ceremonies, came up to me, whispered in my ear, he says, "I really admire you for what you're doing," which I thought was nice. So in other words, I was not totally blocked out or ostracized from the operation. But as I said, I couldn't continue the campaign. Tennessee and Oregon refused to register me, even though there's no registration involved financially there, because they said I was not a viable candidate. And so there was nothing I could do about that. I ended up coming back to Nevada, and I ran for the state Senate, for the U.S. Senate against John Ensign, and the Democratic candidate. I registered as independent when I came back to Nevada, and I came in 3rd out of 5 candidates there. So I did pretty well, considering the fact that I didn't have any financial support or any help. I told you about the John Van Meter case. So where do we go from here? I told you about the Finders child kidnapping ring. By the way, on the Finders, I don't have it with me because I've been traveling, a U.S. Customs report on the Finders, which documents an investigation by that agency that the Finders has been involved in kidnapping children, as I said earlier, since the 1960s. It was exposed in 1987, as I mentioned a few moments ago. I was attending a conference in Las Vegas, and I was selling my book on the Finders. I have a report on it, actually, it's not a book. And we locked up the facility that night. It was on a Saturday night. Came back Sunday. It was supposed to have been locked up. The whole area was locked up. And I looked in my report that I had on the Finders, and that particular page in the Finders that documents the CIA's involved in a child kidnapping ring had been torn out. I've taken my Finders report, and I've given it to the FBI on 6 occasions, and I have yet to be contacted and interviewed by the FBI. They refuse to come talk to me. Absolutely refused. Yet we have this international child kidnapping ring that's operating here in America, and the FBI is ignoring it. So, U.S. Senate Intelligence Report, I have been asked by the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee to do a report because there have been so many complaints about mind control and harassment by a number of us in the United States. And I've put a group of people together who can document this. And this is a report that I'm in the process of preparing right now. This is the outline. I talk about the NSA, National Security Agency. I talk about mind control. The mind control program is Operation Paperclip. Came to this country right after World War II from Nazi Germany. Our government brought in some 900 plus scientists, infiltrated them into government reservations, universities, and hospitals, and continued to operate, and it operates today, the MK Ultra Mind Control Program. In 1987, the Congress investigated it. They said, you nasty boys, you got to quit doing that. Well, they said, we will, but of course they didn't, so it continues today. Microchips, okay? They're putting microchips in babies that are born today. You've probably read about them being placed in dogs and animals. Human radiation experiments. Back in the 1950s, our government was sued by some Canadians who were who were victims of this human radiation. Electromagnetic disturbances. These are technology that is available that our government is using. I have this documented. I'm putting this in this report to the Senate Intelligence Committee. Microtransmitters, monitoring telephone calls, faxes, and emails. And I'll go more into that in just a few minutes. Electronic surveillances. We're talking about illegal telephone taps, aerial chemical trails, chemtrails they call them, toxic gases. Our government's been involved in gases for years. Interception of U.S. mail. And then Sally is the girl I took out of the terrorist cell, which I will discuss in my next video. And then, of course, there's testimony, my testimony. I've already hit this, the Illuminati. Okay, plans for global civilization. So what is the Illuminati? Well, for those of you who don't know, the Illuminati was established and its 25 goals were announced on May the 1st, 1773, 200 and some years ago. The Rothschild family in England had commissioned a young Jesuit priest, Adam Weishaupt, to come up with the goals to take over the world. And on May the 1st, 1776, Weishaupt announced these goals. They're very much more detailed than what I'm going to give to you today, but they are well written and established in a book called Pawns in the Game by William Guy Carr. You rule by force. Preach liberalism. Bring about class wars. Any and all means to reach their goals, whether they're legal or illegal. You rule by force, as I said earlier. Their plans must be kept secret until the very last moment. They're keeping them secret right today as we speak. They use mock psychology. Corrupt the youth with drugs and alcohol and then corrupt the morals of the youth. Well, that's a foregone conclusion. Look what's happening to our youth today, all the drugs that have been brought in here. South Central LA, the CIA brought in those drugs, and William Tenay, or Commissioner Tenay, not William, from the CIA went out and had an open house, a town hall meeting, and they booed him out of the meeting because the people in South Central LA know that the CIA has been bringing the drugs in. Seize property by all means. Accumulate wealth. Advocate war. And at the peace table, direct the conference so that neither side wins. Elect their own candidates and advisors to the candidates. Control the press. Let me just show you what I have here. Oh, this is the control the media. This is from the February 9th, 1917 Congressional Record. And at that time, it states, as Congressman Callaway stood up on the floor, and he said that on March 15th, 1950, the J.P. Morgan interests, the steel shipbuilding and power people and their subsidiaries, I can't read it here, put together 12 men high up in the newspaper world and employed them to select the most influential newspapers in the United States. These 22 men bought and reviewed 279 newspapers in the United States. They picked out 25 newspapers which they thought they could control, and that was in 1915. Here we are some 90 years later, so you can imagine how much control they have now. Another one of the goals was to have their agenteurs appear at the scene after a tragedy occurs, arrange for prosecution, and appear as heroes. That's what's happened with 911. And I'll go into 911 in my next lecture. Establish depression and financial panics, enforce unemployment and hunger, influential Freemasonry to take advantage of secrecy within an organization, use philanthropy as a cloak to hide the subversive goals, train the leaders to use fancy, high-sounding phrases, make lavish promises to the masses. Promises can be broken afterwards, it doesn't matter. Advocate revolutions to bring about the population to speedy subjection. Use secret reports as agents as saboteurs. Establish a world government through huge monopolies and economic control. High taxes and unfair competition to bring about economic ruin of the population. Control raw materials. Organize agitation among workers. Make sure any financial gains and increase wages will not be a benefit to them in the long run. Build up armaments. Infiltrate law enforcement and the military. Members of the world government will be appointed by a dictator. Infiltrate all classes and levels of society with emphasis on corruption and controlling the youth. Teach them theories and principles known to be false and arbitration of the law. These are the goals of the Illuminati. Okay, so how do we get around, accomplish some of these goals? Well, these are executive orders. Executive orders were originally issued for the purpose of the president directing departmental heads to give their guidance and tell them what he wanted. But the presidents have used these executive goals orders against the general population. These are some examples. In fact, these are a number of examples of the executive orders that directly affect our population. Executive Order 10995, take over all communications. 10997 takes over all electrical power. 10998 takes over all food resources and farms. 10999 takes over all means of transportation, controls highways and seaports. Executive Order 11,000 drafts all citizens into workforces under government supervision, slave labor in other words. Executive Order 11001 takes over all health, welfare, and educational functions. Executive Order 1002 empowers the Post Office General to register all citizens nationwide. We're going to have to register. We're going to number all of us, all Americans. There's a law by December 31st, 2009. We'll have everybody have their own number. Just be like Nazi Germany, 1933. Executive Order 11003, take over all airports and aircrafts. Executive Order 11004, take over housing and finance, authorities and housing designated as unsafe. Establish raw locations for population. Executive Order 11005 takes over all railroads, inland waterways, and public storage facilities. Executive Order 11051 designates responsibilities of the Office of Emergency Planning, giving authority authorization to put the above orders into effect in times of increased international tension or economic crisis. And then comes the big one, Executive Order 11490. All of the above orders are immediately activated. John Kennedy at Columbia University in 1963 said it perfectly. Quote, "The high office of the president has been used to commit a plot to destroy America's freedom, and before I leave this office, I must inform the citizens of their plight." We've already discussed control of the media, the illegal wiretaps. Well, in 1982, I had a contract put out on me. I learned about it. And I had an office in Westwood, California. I had a thriving business. I had 8 people working with me. I had my own investigative organization. And I had to leave town all of a sudden because of this contract. As a matter of fact, I had 2 men waiting for me across from my front door. And my landlady noticed this. I didn't go home that particular night. Talk about divine intervention. And ended up going to Dallas, Texas for 18 months. I also worked with F. Lee Bailey for a period. So when I came back from my trip after 18 months, I basically had let my staff go. I still had the office. I was trying to keep going. And I was paying my own bills. I had always had an office manager who paid my bills. And in paying one of my bills, I noticed that my telephone, I had a bill from an organization known as Answerall Answering Service. And I did not have an Answerall Answering Service. I had my own answering service, not that one. And I noticed that it was like so many dollars. I think it was $7 for every mile. It was like $42. And the address was on West Pico in Los Angeles, California. So what I did is I figured it was an illegal operation involving illegal telephone taps. And I went down and took pictures of all the cars in the area. And then I started checking out the automobiles. And I found out that most of the automobiles' license plates were not registered. So I knew there was something up. So then what I did is I filed this lawsuit. And as I said, it said in this newspaper article, Los Angeles Daily News 22186, ex-FBI man sued General Telephone. Says the telephone tapped. He got the bill. I paid my own bill. And they were tapping me. I filed a $10 million lawsuit against GTE. And we went right up to the period when we were going to depose one of the key witnesses. And my attorney said to me, "You know, we ought to settle this, Ted." And so I decided to settle it because the man who actually was running my real telephone answering service started investigating this, and he ended up dead. Died under mysterious circumstances. So I figured it'd probably be best if I did settle it. So we settled it for $6,000. I found out later that my attorney was a personal friend of Bill Clinton's, and as a matter of fact, received Christmas cards from the White House on every Christmas. So that was just this is a documentation of illegal wiretaps. It's very well documented. FBI informant Pam Fawcett. As I mentioned earlier, Pam was with the FBI, working with the FBI and with DEA, tried to set me up on an illegal drug operation. I'm an honest man. I wouldn't have any part of it. And she finally ended up coming over to my side. Incidental to this, I learned that after I wrote a letter to FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., Buck Revell complained about the investigation, about the fact they tried to set me up on a drug operation. And I learned that the FBI had subpoenaed Pam's parents' telephone. And the reason they did this, of course, is because they thought maybe that I'd use Pam to set them up. I also learned later, and by the way, as a result of me developing and learning about this information, I wrote a letter to Buck Revell, who was number 2 man in the FBI. This is the letter. I learned that the FBI has subpoenaed the telephone records of Mr. and Mrs. Ray Fawcett, Pam Fawcett's parents, because I presume you're attempting to establish whether or not Pam was truthful in her statements to me, because I had furnished them Pam's statement in a cover letter, and where she gave me the statement and admitted that she was working for the FBI and DEA against me. And I told Buck Revell at that time, I said, Buck, you people are Bush, meaning Bush League and Major League Baseball, minor league baseball, I should say. So for your information, you passed a polygraph examination. I suggest you also compare the known handwriting of this Rick Horn, who was a DEA agent who wrote the note that she gave to me from one of the telephone conversations, which he failed to retrieve. Suggest that you check the known handwriting on the note with this Rick agent. This is what I told him. She says that, Pam says that the notes are in Horn's handwriting. They were given to her by Horn to assist in her recorded telephone conversations to me. Pam has advised me she's willing to be interviewed by you and any other law enforcement agency. Of course, I said I wanted to be present if that's the case. So that's my experience with Pam Fawcett. The last time I talked to Pam, she had a hit on her, and she was going into hiding. And the FBI has an informant program, ladies and gentlemen. If you didn't know it, I'm going to tell you all about it. Okay? In the last 27 years, I guarantee I've had at least 15 to 18 people planted on me. What's better than to have somebody come in and work shoulder to shoulder with you, and then to use that information that they gather against you? And that's what's happened to me. Jim Kloberg is just an example. Also, Stu Webb's another example. There's another example, Barbara Hartwell. Barbara Hartwell admitted to me that she was from a CIA family. Kloberg, I knew him back in my campaign when I ran for president. In fact, he was my campaign manager. And I took Jim in. He's a very outgoing individual, very bright, very intelligent, excellent with the computer, got a lot of abilities, and I trusted him. And then what happened is, when I went to Texas to campaign, Myra Dipple had $8,000 worth of gold, and she wanted to donate that to my campaign. Excuse me, $800 worth of gold. She wanted to donate that to my campaign. And so we mailed the gold from Texas to Las Vegas, where my headquarters was. I've learned later that Kloberg took that $800 worth of gold and put it in his pocket. Okay, I didn't know that at the time. So after the campaign was over, I'd run for president in the Democratic primary, 2 states. Came back, ran as an independent for the U.S. Senate in Nevada, Southern District of Nevada. And I received some letters. And what these letters were people who had bought my books and reports and research, which is available to you today on my website, of course. Like, for example, Oklahoma City Report, which I will go into in the next lecture. 222-page report. So we were selling my reports and my research to the public for contributions and using that money on the campaign. So what happened is, after the campaign was over, I received on February 22nd, 1996, from Mark Murphy. If you look on the sheet there, on the board, on the screen, it's number 1, about second paragraph. 2100 West Drake Road, Fort Collins, Colorado. He sent $55 postal money order for the purchase of my reports, which he never received. It was subsequently learned that the money order was deposited into an unauthorized bank account, and that's the bank account number, 037262862, payable to Bank of America. And this bank account was actually a bank account set up by Jim Kloberg. In December 96, Miss A. Matthews of Los Angeles, California, furnished a flyer dated March the 20th, 1996, captioned, quote, "Commission to elect constitutionalists," end quote. This flyer solicited the purchase of my products. It was fraudulently signed Ted Gunderson with the return address of 236 South Rainbow Boulevard, Suite 252, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89128-5329, end quote. Joan Lynch is listed as the treasurer. And then another situation came to my attention. A Miss Marie Worrell of Harrisville, Missouri, furnished a copy of a $55 check she wrote on April the 8th, 1996, payable to CES, that's a Commission to Elect Constitutionalists, of course, at the same Rainbow address. And Miss Worrell never received the products she ordered. The check was deposited into the same bank account as the other one, probably Bank of America. I wrote this letter. Oh, then, of course, there was a second or possibly a third bank account under the name Committee to Elect Gunderson or Gunderson for Congress, as it appears in a number of campaign contributions were not processed through the official campaign account. And then here I mentioned the $800 that Meyer Dipple donated. So what did I do with this information? Also after my campaign, before I received these letters, by the way, I had information from one of my sources who told me that Jim Kloberg, and I didn't know this till afterwards, was actually an informant for the FBI. Jim Kloberg was planted in my campaign to sabotage my campaign, no question about it. So on January 20th, 1997, I wrote a letter to the U.S. Attorney in Las Vegas, Nevada, Catherine Landris, and I explained that I ran for the Democratic Party primary, U.S. Congress later. He was a key campaign manager, explained the situation, and I asked for an investigation. I did receive a response from her. She said she'd referred it over to the FBI. Here's the letter from her to me saying, "Your letter confirms receipt of your correspondence, so on and so forth. The state. I have forwarded a copy of your letter to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for their review and or their investigation. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me." I didn't hear from the FBI. So I wrote another letter, which I didn't put on the chart here, or didn't put up above, on display, I should say. And I received another letter back from Ms. Landreth, and she said that she had furnished it again to the FBI, and the FBI never contacted me, never came back and see me. This is a clear-cut case of fraud, election law violation, of which the Federal Bureau of Investigation is responsible for investigating. This is another federal violation that I have furnished to the FBI on a platter, as I did with the Finders case, with the documentation that the Finders is an international child kidnapping ring being operated by the CIA. This is another flagrant violation of the law by individuals that is being ignored by the FBI. By the way, I forgot to mention, after the Finders organization in Washington, D.C., the kidnapping organization I mentioned a few moments ago, was exposed, they moved their operation. I understand. I've been told by a confidential informant. I don't have more details than this. I don't know if it's true. I cannot say for sure, but I want to tell you this. I've been told they are now operating out of Wichita, Kansas, and they are operating out of a church in that area. True or not, I don't know. I haven't had an opportunity lately to check into it. I've been so busy. Los Angeles Police Department. Oh, excuse me, I didn't mention one of my favorite people, Stu Webb. Stu Webb, an FBI informant. Another one that was planted on me. Now you have to understand, folks, that the reason these people planted on me because I'm being critical of the federal government. I'm telling it like it is. We have people in the government who are ignoring the law and violating the law, and nobody's doing anything about it. Well, Stu Webb worked in my campaign also, by the way. And after the campaign was over, he came to me. This would have been 2 years later. And he said, I'm out of work. I need a place to stay. I just need to stay for 4 days. I'd appreciate it if you'd take me in. At that time, I had a 3-bedroom condominium in Las Vegas. I was taking care of an elderly lady who had some health problems, and she had her bedroom and a private bath. I had my bedroom, and I let him use the 3rd bedroom. Well, instead of staying for 4 days, he stayed for 7 months. And during that period, I fed him, housed him, even bought him a suit, bought him some clothes, used my automobile, and he was supposed to be working with me. I took him in with the understanding he was going to help me with my projects. He was absolutely worthless, to be honest with you, incompetent, and not real bright. But he does have a big mouth, and his mouth goes like this constantly. So I learned that after he left, that he'd stolen a number of my boxes, a lot of my research. I had a book called Thanks to the Memories by Bryce Taylor. He took 35 copies of Thanks to the Memories. They were given to me on consignment. They retailed for like $35, $40 each. That's a lot of money. He took those. And as a matter of fact, he waited until I left Las Vegas and went to Los Angeles for some business before he stole me blind. And incidental to that, while I was out of town, I had another individual who I had there working with me. Tom Gall was his name. And Stu Webb came up one night, again after I told him to leave, from the street up, climbed up the balconies, over the patio outside balconies, on the 4th floor, hand over hand on the rails. He came in, assaulted Tom Gall, stole my reports, and disappeared. I filed a complaint against him. Went down to the police department. And the police department did do some investigation, fortunately. I'm thankful for that, because usually they don't. But we could not find any stolen property, so they didn't have a strong case. The police officer was a very, very, very nice gentleman. So then sometime later, somebody told me that Stu Webb was bashing me. By the way, his parting words going out the door were, "I'm going to destroy you and the patriot community." Those were the last things he said to me. And then he came back when I was out of town and stole my products. Sometime later, I heard that Stu Webb had bashed me, criticized me on a DVD. I ordered a copy of the DVD. I sat down and reviewed it. 23 minutes into the DVD, Stu Webb says, "I've been working with FBI agent Robin Salvador, Las Vegas, and I've been given a symbol number." I was sitting on a couch. The lady I take care of, the elderly lady I take care of, was sitting on the other end of the couch. I almost fell off the couch, folks, because to you or somebody that doesn't know anything about the FBI, that doesn't mean anything. But to me, being given a symbol number means you're an FBI informant. The FBI gives symbol numbers to their informants so that the information that's attributed to them in the reports does not identify the source from which it came. And here he had it right on the video. So I can't believe this. I can't believe he's that stupid. But he is pretty stupid, by the way. So I told some friends of mine about that I had this video. And I set it aside for about 10 days, 8 or 10 days, because I was busy. And my friends said, send me a copy of it. So about 8 or 10 days after I reviewed it on the couch, from the couch, I made 6 or 8 copies of it. It was a video. And I sent it around the country. I received a phone call. There's nothing in there about him working for FBI agent Robin Salvador. There's nothing in there about him being given a symbol number. I said, what? And I took that video off the shelf and I played it. It was not there anymore. Somebody had come into my condominium and taken that video and switched another one in there that did not have that information in it. We call it, in the FBI, surreptitious entries. More illegal activity, burglary. It's plain burglary. I've been burglarized so many times, it's unbelievable. So what I did is, of course, I ordered another one from the producer with John Gentry out of Dallas, and now I have both of them. But I found it rather ironic and excellent documentation that they have been coming into my home residence on a regular basis. They, meaning this rogue element, a satanic group that operates within the confines of the government. So there's Jim Kloberg, there's Stu Webb, there have been others. I've had so many people planted on me since I became critical of the federal government. I feel like the Garden of Eden, to be honest with you. I've had so many entries into my condominium and my residence, I feel like it's Grand Central Station. The most recent incident where I can document this, I moved from Las Vegas to Nevada in May of 2006, because I was being poisoned, gas and so forth, had arsenic in me, cyanide and what have you. And in Nebraska, they've even come into this little small town I live in, Claytonia, you folks, if you want to come visit me, feel free. Claytonia, Nebraska, 200 Adams Street. They've even come into my house there. And the reason I know they've come into my house there is because I've had some of my research missing. And also I keep a gun in my bedroom. I have several guns. That's for the benefit of the New World Order boys when they come after my guns. I just want to let you know I have 3 of them. I had 4 of them. I gave one of them to somebody, one of my friends. I'm not going to tell you who the friend was that received it. But I keep a gun in my bedroom. All my guns are loaded. I live alone, except I do have an associate there, Clarence Malcolm, reliable, dependable, loyal person. He's had to move because he's been harassed himself. And I recently checked my gun here within about the last 6 weeks. And guess what? It's a revolver, a .357 Combat Magnum. Fantastic weapon, by the way. And the bullets are all out of the revolver. I never in my life have had a gun that didn't have a bullet in it. So the boys have come in. I call them boys, junior high boys, children, whatever you want to call them. The boys have come in to my house in Claytonia. Claytonia, by the way, is a town of about 5 blocks long. There's not a red light. There's not a stop sign on the main street. We have a bar, Coyote Inn. We have a bank, and we have a post office, and a couple other minor shops, barber, by the way, and we have a welding shop. So, you know, there's not much there for anybody to come at, but when they come around me, I see them, because I can see the whites on their eyes there. In Las Vegas or LA, a little more difficult because there's so many people around you. By the way, flying in today to Topeka at the Midway Airport in Chicago, I picked up a surveillance on us. I was there with Stan and Ms. Johnson. What I think is a surveillance, I can't prove it, but it was very apparent to me. And having been the experience that I've had, and as professional as I've been, and I am good at my work, I know when I have a surveillance on me. So That's basically Stu Webb, Surreptitious Entries, Jim Kloberg, Planted People on Me, and the tune goes on. Well, here several years ago, I mentioned in the beginning of my lecture that I've had my window shot out twice. On October 15th, 2003, I'm in my daughter's apartment in Los Angeles, and I'm standing about 2 feet from the window, and somebody shoots out the window. About that same time, let's see what we got here. That's my letter to, I told you about my letter to Landreth, and I didn't even put it on the board. I apologize, folks. There's my address, 750 Royal Crest Circle. There's a letter from the U.S. Attorney to me confirming that she'd received my letter. And there's the window that was shot out. In addition to that, on October 15, 2003, 10:15 a.m., I had this window shot out. And then in addition to that, I had a threatening phone call. Came in on the voicemail, my daughter's voicemail. Specifically mentioned my daughter's name. And there was satanic chanting in the beginning, and then my daughter's name, and then more satanic chanting. So this was, I also about this same time, this was November 2003, received this letter. Dear Mr. Gunderson, we heard you've been poking around in business to make our Steve Cooley look bad. Well, Steve Cooley is district attorney in Los Angeles, California. If you value what little of a life you have chasing your imaginary conspiracies, you stupid old man, well, I may be old, but I don't think I'm stupid. You'll steer far and wide of this business unless you want an enema of boiling lead serviced to your arse. You're a little too old to be running around like Fox Bloody Mulder on the telly. That is fiction. This is real life. In real life, the heroes are those who fought the imperial, bad word, I don't like that word, like the U.S. and the U.K. Those whose greatest weapons is the heart. I suggest you engage in a more leisurely pastime like paying a visit to that little Jack Kevorkian fellow. I hear he has an excellent cure for life, and it's signed, I don't know what that sign is. If you can read it, you're a better man than I am. I received this letter in November. So November and October 2003 was quite a series of events that occurred to me. So I took this recording, satanic chanting, my daughter's name and so forth, to the Los Angeles Police Department. And I went in, knocked on the door. Of course, they didn't knock on the door. They don't have a door. They have a counter. I talked to the sergeant. I said, Sergeant, I need to talk to a detective. I have a problem. And I played it for the sergeant. He says, okay, I'll get a detective. So this Detective Pat Barron came out. And here's his card. And he introduced himself. I told him I'm a retired FBI chief. I played the recording for him. He says, you're right. That is a threat. We're going to put a trap on your line immediately. Well, a trap is what they put on a line to trace the call that's coming into your phone number so that you know where the source is, okay? So I go back to my daughter's apartment, and I receive a phone call, and a man who identifies himself with the LAPD, Los Angeles Police Department, says, just want to confirm we're going to put a trap on your line. Well, I thought to myself, well, if I got it, I might have a tap on my line, and then the bad guys are going to know that they're putting a trap on it, right? So, but anyway, it was too late for me to do anything about it. So I was very happy that they were going to do this. And then I received 7 more threatening phone calls, hang-ups and so forth. And I received a total of 11 during that period. And I am rejoicing because here I have For 27 years, I've been receiving these stupid phone messages and threats, and I didn't know where they were coming from. I didn't know the source, and I'm saying, hallelujah. I'm going to find out who's behind this now. So I'm really happy about this, of course, and I'm very thankful to Detective Barron. So then the next thing I know, I receive a letter from Detective Barron, undated. I received it January 4th. In the meantime, there were a flurry of letters before this letter came in, to and from the LAPD and me, and the LAPD said they didn't put a trap on the line. So I write back and forth, back and forth. Barron writes me in this letter, I said, I understand your efforts to communicate with the Los Angeles Police Department appeared to have been frustrated. We will make every effort to accommodate you and address those safety concerns fall under the purview of the LAPD. I'm sure that you understand the resources of this office are limited to the local Los Angeles area. Well, what does that have to do? I'm in Los Angeles. So anyway, so he goes on and he says he received previous correspondence from me. And long story short, they say they didn't put the trap on the line. So I filed a complaint with the Internal Affairs of the LAPD. Here's the complaint number, CF number 040958. And I basically say, hey, you fellas said you were going to put a trap on the line. You didn't put a trap on the line. Now you say you never put a trap on the line. I want an investigation. I get a voicemail back, recording. This is a transcript of the recording. Mr. Gunderson, this is Pat Barron, LAPD, responding back to you regarding your inquiry. There never was a trap placed on the telephone. My number is 213-972-2921, and I checked with the SPC and verified that there never was a trap. Pause. Placed on the telephone. Pause. Pause. If you have any questions, please call me. Well, not to be stood up, LAPD or anybody else. I say, I'm going to get those records. And I'm working a case involving a hospital where I had a statement from a doctor who says that the hospital murdered this lady. And so I used that case as an excuse to subpoena LAPD files. And I issued the subpoena to the LAPD. This is what I received back in response. I am employed as a management analyst for the Los Angeles Police Department and assigned to the Risk Management Group, Office of the Human Resources. I'm a duly authorized representative of the custodian of records, so on and so forth. Long story short, no documents or records are transmitted to you today because after a thorough and proper search based on the information provided, we were unable to locate the requested documents. In other words, what they're saying is they don't have any information in their files about me. Cover up. Why? I contend that those threatening phone calls, 11 of them, I contend those were by this government element, this rogue criminal enterprise that's infiltrated our government, the U.S. government. I want to make it very clear. There are a lot of good FBI agents out there, a lot of good NSA, a lot of good CIA, a lot of good BATF, a lot of good IRS people out there. But it's the people at the top that are causing the problems as far as I'm concerned. We don't have the leadership at the top that we need, and the infiltration at the top, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think there's any question about it, is by the Illuminati, which I explained a few moments ago. The Illuminati has infiltrated virtually every level of our society, every level of our society. They control the big corporations, they control the utilities, telephone companies, power. I'm not sure about the power and water, but I can't say that for sure. But I know that in other areas they definitely are in control. Some of the other tactics that have been used against me, my mail has been intercepted. And this is an example of it right here. I attended a conference in May of '06. And this lady, I blocked out her last name, said that she sent in an order for $20, never received the products, never received the check. I've had incident after incident like this. People ordering my products and never receiving them. Cyber terrorism. Well, I can tell you right now, cyber terrorism is by the government, by the element within the government, is there. It's with us. There's not an awful lot we can do about it. I have a new internet site up, a new website up. It's one-free-dvd.com. And it's brand new. And my associate, Clarence Malcolm, tried to enter the site, and it comes back about have a party. I can't read it, but meet and party. Meet and party. See where it says meet and party? Excuse me, I should look here. Meet and party. What it is, it's a porno site. And it's a porno site with an address for Brett John Gunderson, Harvey Bay, Texas, 4855, Australia. And he did some more research on it, and he learned that it's actually it's a porno site out of Mexico. Who else has the ability to get into our computers? I don't know of anybody. Private enterprise certainly doesn't. And the private enterprise has no interest in it. Like I said, the first part of my lecture, there's no money in this. Private enterprise is in it to raise money for revenue. This is costing individuals, or somebody, the government undoubtedly, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Can you imagine how much money they've spent on me, just from what I've told you here tonight? Okay, chemical trails. I've been told these chemical trails drop poison that affect the youth and the elderly, and it affects their breathing, their lungs. I've been in Mexico and seen them. I've been in Canada and seen them. This particular instance, here's Barcelona, Spain. So it's all over the world. A sinister activity, I'm sure. Internment camps in America. Now, on October 28, 2006, President Bush signed into law a provision which, according to Senator Patrick Leahy, will actually encourage the president to declare federal martial law. It does so by revising the Insurrection Act, a set of laws that limits the president's ability to deploy troops within the United States. The Insurrection Act has historically, along with the Posse Comitatus, helped to enforce strict prohibitions on military involvement in domestic law enforcement. With one cloak swipe of the pen, Bush is seeking to undo these prohibitions. Public Law 109-364, or the John Werney Defense Authorization Act of 2007. The president also, this allows the president to station troops anywhere in America and take control of the state-based National Guard units without the consent of the governor. In order to suppress public disorder, President Bush claims. Easily, the Military Commission Act of 2006, in a sense, the two laws complement one another. Illuminati. Now, this is a list of internment camps throughout America. I'm going to go through them quite rapidly. We see Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana. I don't see what that, the Unicor, whatever that is. Kansas. Hey, we're in Kansas now, aren't we? Leavenworth, one of the camps. El Dorado is also. Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Virginia, West Virginia, Washington, Wisconsin, Wyoming, and other locations in the United States. Recently, an issue was made public where the children ages 10 to 17 in the Texas Youth Commission were being sexually abused by the leaders and also by some of the guards. Actually, the case broke because of a Texas Ranger who ran across this situation and began his investigation in 2005. He presented the results of the investigation to the Attorney General of the state of Texas and to the U.S. Attorney, Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and they had no interest in prosecuting these individuals. July 28, 2005, a letter from Bill Bauman, Assistant U.S. Attorney in the U.S. Attorney's Office, declining prosecution on the argument that under 18 U.S. Code, Section 242, the government should have to demonstrate that the boys subjected to sexual abuse sustained bodily injury. These are 10 to 17-year-old boys who are being confronted by men with badges and forced into sex. Bauman wrote that, as you know, our interviews of the victims revealed that none sustained bodily injury. Bauman's letter went on to say that he suggested the victims may have willingly participated or even enjoyed the acts of pedophilia involved. As you know, consent is frequently an issue in sexual assault cases. Although none of the victims admit that they consented to the sexual contact, none resisted or voiced any objection to the conduct. Several of the victims suggested that they were simply getting off on the school administration. What do you expect a 10-year-old boy to do when a grown man comes up and confronts him? And the governor, and appointed by Kimbrough, his former staff chief and Homeland Security Director, to serve as special master to lead the investigation into the sexual abuse. Shortly thereafter, the commissioner stopped a hiring practice that had allowed convicted felons to work as administrators in the system. The practice had involved a requirement that prior criminal records be destroyed for employees hired by the commission. They're destroying criminal records of people that they're hiring. Again, ages 10 to 17. Now, Governor Rick Perry claimed to reporters he learned only last month of the teen sex scandal rocking the state of Texas. However, other individuals wrote, and the Texas Ranger who investigated the case wrote, that he knew about it as early as February 2005. Mind control programs. Right after World War II, I think it was 1947, our government brought more than 900 German scientists, Nazis, into the United States to continue working the MK-Ultra mind control program. This program was a combination of drugs, torture, and hypnosis, and they would take the victim and put him under unusual conditions. There's a movie called Manchurian Candidate with Frank Sinatra years ago that was actually well demonstrated and well documented, well illustrated, I should say. And this program has continued for years. I think I mentioned it earlier in the lecture. This is what you have here is CIA's Gottlieb ran the LSD mind control testing. There's your documentation. And later on down below, it mentions in the article in the 50s and 60s that Gottlieb was involved in the MK Ultra program, the code name for the agency's secret experiment to probe the effects of mind-altering drugs. Letter to Attorney General Ashcroft. I got a little upset. August 29, 2003. 2003 was kind of I was a busy day, a busy year for me, wasn't it? Yeah. October 2003, August 2003. And I was getting a little disgusted because on this occasion, the Attorney General of the United States had announced he was repealing the USA Patriot Act, which he claimed boosts law enforcement's ability to investigate terrorism would endanger Americans. You stated to abandon this tool would disconnect the dots, risk Americans' lives, sacrifice liberty, and reject September 11th's lessons. This is what he said publicly. You announced a national campaign, this is what I wrote to him, to defend this act and your plan to visit more than a dozen cities, but they would not involve public forums. Your speeches will be categorized, I missed that word, tightly before law enforcement officials only. You were quoted as saying, if we knew then what we know now, we would have passed the Patriot Act 6 months prior to September 11th. The Congress to have done less would have been a failure of government's basic responsibility to preserve life and liberty. I'll tell you a little bit about, now I'm going to get into the Patriot Act a little later on. But the Patriot Act was passed within weeks after 9/11. It's many hundreds of pages long. Do you think that wasn't prepared prior to 9/11? It was. So anyway, I wrote this letter to Attorney General Ashcroft. And on page 2, here's what I said. As a result of 9/11, we now have Homeland Security and the USA Patriot Act. The U.S. Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and who knows how many other alphabet agencies will be able to legally keep track of all credit cards, bank transactions, car rental receipts, gun purchases, passport applications, magazine subscriptions, medical prescriptions, academic records, bank deposits, trips everyone books, events we attend, driver's license, bridge toll records, judicial and divorce records, rental car records, telephone records, internet traffic and complaints by nosy neighbors to the FBI. It has been publicly announced that 1 in every 10 Americans are expected to become informants for the U.S. government. Now listen to this next one. This is because I wrote him this because I researched it, okay? The Pentagon has developed an urban surveillance system that can track, record, and analyze the movement of every vehicle in a, quote, foreign city, end quote. And what about searches of our neighbors and our property without a search warrant and randomly tapping our phones and seizing our property? So I wrote this letter to Attorney General, never received a response. I don't understand that. So be it. We're not the only ones who are worried about invasion of our privacy and our constitutional rights. Here's an article about the Germans. We have the same situation in Germany as we have here. The Interior Minister is seen by some as a defender against terrorism and by others as a man out to crush freedoms. Same as the Patriot Act, Homeland Security. The Pentagon, here's another one, article about the Pentagon. CIA expands domestic surveillances. This is recent, January 14th, 2007. Britain is not to be left out. Britain joins the FBI phone tap system. Mexico's not to be left out. Mexico Attorney General goes high-tech for security. They're destroying our sovereignty. eliminating our borders. This is a plan that was hatched when Nixon was president. And you will see here that the country is divided into 10 districts or divisions. And we're in the Midwest area here in Kansas. There's a division for the West, Northeast, and so forth. This was an executive order, another executive order. Now I looked at this and I have to laugh, because if we're going to do away with the states, then what are you going to do when you have, say, the University of Oklahoma play the University of Southern California in football? If we're going to do away with the states, we're going to have to say a team number 3, 4, or 5, whatever the number might be, in Division 6 is playing team number 1 or 2 in Division 10, right? That's what we're going to have to do. We're going to do away with all this, of course. That's what the government would like to have us do. So I had to laugh at that, because I just gave a lecture in South Bend, Indiana, and I thought about that possibility. Notre Dame versus USC. How are you going to call that one? A division team. You're playing another division team. Border agents receive no help from Bush. There were 2 border patrolmen doing their duty recently. It just happened a few months ago. Actually, about a year ago, a little less than a year ago. Protecting our border from drugs. A Mexican drug dealer came over, got in a fight with the Border Patrol. I think that was on one occasion. Another occasion he came over and the Border Patrolman shot him in the buttocks when he was retreating. Our government prosecuted these 2 Border Patrolmen in court. One received 10 years, one received 11 years. And the Mexican drug dealer, he's turning around and suing the U.S. government for $5 million. There are a number of congressmen who went to the White House and asked that these men be pardoned, 53 of them as a matter of fact, but to no avail. Now, also, what we have is a super highway. It's being built from Mexico City up into Canada. The people in Texas are complaining so loud, and the newspapers, the local newspapers, the small newspapers, are so critical of it, that the Australian toll road magnate Margariti agreed Wednesday to purchase 40 local newspapers, primarily in Texas and Oklahoma, for $80 million. This bank is Australia's largest capital-raising firm and has invested billions in purchasing roads in the U.S., Canada, and UK. Most recently, the company joined with the company from Spain and a 75-year lease on the 157-mile Indiana toll road. We have foreign countries, people from foreign countries coming in and buying our toll roads, controlling our movement of our citizens. And this is an example of coming in, buying newspapers, because the public opinion is being swayed against this super toll road. Here is the super toll road. It goes 4,000 or 5,000 miles. It starts in Mexico City, and you can see the tentacles that go all the way up into Canada, through Kansas City, Oklahoma City, Denver, Cheyenne, and here on the East Coast. It is 12 lanes wide. 12 lanes wide. It's taking up thousands of acres of farms, particularly in Texas. Okay, what's happened recently? Here's another interesting experience. Files with veterans' data has been stolen. Social Security numbers of millions are at risk. Why? You think that's a random burglary? No, I don't think so. What can they do with this information? What better way to identify those who have weapons and are most likely to resist the government or if martial law is declared. That's what I think these are all about. Electronic voting machines. Why do you think we have, I would say out of the 535 congressmen, senators in Washington, D.C., if we have 25 or 35 that are real good Americans, I think we'd be lucky, based on what I've seen. And I'll go more into that in my next lecture. Some of the information that I passed on to these congressmen. So how do they get there? Well, first of all, many of them get there because we have electronic voting machines. They can vote in anybody they like. My friend, John DeCamp, who I mentioned earlier, who was involved in the Franklin cover-up case, won $1 million judgment against Larry King, the black man, not Larry King Live, on behalf of Paul Benassi, the informant, who was one of the kids who was involved in the movement and was sexually abused over and over and over again, was used as a decoy for kidnappings. John DeCamp ran for an office, the state senate in Nebraska, in May of 2006. He's well known there because of the work that he did on the Franklin cover-up. By the way, on this $1 million judgment he received, it was by default because nobody showed up. And he was standing on a street corner in Lincoln, Nebraska, and a stranger walked up to him, this was several years ago, and said, if you ever collect that $1 million, you'll never live to spend it. Now, John lives in Claytonia, Nebraska. That's the reason I moved there, by the way. Like I say, a town of 296. The reason he moved to Claytonia, Nebraska is because he had a home in Lincoln, Nebraska, a town of over 200,000 people. And he was exposed in satanic movements and satanic activity, and some of the people in the Franklin cover-up case. By the way, the pictures in the case, I'm going to go back a little bit. The pictures that were developed on pedophilia and sex with children and so forth were presented to the courts in Nebraska, and the judge put a gag order on them, locked them up, and made the statement that we're not going to destroy the reputation of reputable individuals by releasing these to the public. The courts did that. John DeCamp was able to go in and look at them because he was an attorney on behalf of Paul Benassi, but he cannot talk about it. Cannot talk about what he saw. He was not able to even take notes while he was in there. But anyway, so John ran for office. May of last year, 2006. State Senate. 3 weeks before, he took a poll. He was leading all candidates. There were 10 or 11 candidates. All candidates in his district with better than 65% of the vote. Come time for election, he ended up in third place with 28% of the vote, I think it was. John checked and found out that in the precincts where there were paper ballots, he had 65 to 70% of the vote, which is what what he learned in his when he took checked this 3 weeks before. In the areas, the precincts where there were electronic voting machines, he had between 8 and 10%. There's no question about it. John won that election. And this is the way they're controlling who they send to Washington. Then once they get them to Washington, D.C., what do? They send the kids in and blackmail them through sex and drugs. Then they can tell them how to vote. Winston Churchill once said, democracy is the worst form of government other than all the others. Wonderful. Democracy is wonderful. It's who runs the democracy that is of concern to us. So, U.S. Navy infiltrated. This is a building of the U.S. Navy, on Navy property, Coronado Island. And as you can see, it's in the form of a swastika. Those responsible. Well, this is our President Bush, a young man, Bob Kerry, also a young man, when they were at Yale University. Now, I said those responsible. These people are not really responsible. These are pawns. As William Guy Carr in Pawns in the Game said, these people are being used as pawns. The real people are behind the scenes. The 13 Illuminati families that rule the world, so to speak. Republican logo. You see something unusual about the stars? The stars have been inverted. The point of the star used to be at the top. Now the point's at the bottom. This is the satanic goat head. It doesn't say that, but this is what it infers, in my opinion. This change in the Republican logo occurred, I think, in 1995, 1996. Shows how powerful they are. Divine intervention. Well, through all my experiences, I'm here today, alive, talking to you, fortunately, because of divine intervention. Okay? In 1982, I mentioned earlier in my lecture, coming home one night, the landlady had left a note on my car, see me, 2 men the night before sat in a car crossing my home at 1:30 in the morning on Kelton's 500 South Kelton in Los Angeles. One of them got out. She was parking her car. The landlady was. She got out. One of them got out of the car, came over to her. Do you know where Ted Gunderson lives? I'd always told my landlord, anybody around me, if anybody ever asks about me, you don't know. You don't know me, you don't know where I live. She said she didn't know. He waited until 1:45 in the morning, and then he left. It just so happens that particular night, a friend of mine had come in from out of town, and I stayed at my friend's house that night. So it was just by divine intervention I didn't go home that night, okay? This is about the same time I had the 13 dead red roses, 13 dead chrysanthemums left on my front porch with a note, poacher in the grass, once a cub, the lion sees shades of death and life. Okay? I had another occasion. I had a client come in on a Saturday to see me. This was right after these 2 men sat across from my front door in the car, 1:40 till 1:45 a.m. And he'd come in from Dallas. He wanted to talk to me about business. It was on a Saturday, as I said, and I entered the door, had my gun in my hand, and I apologized because I was expecting him. And we talked, and he wanted me to do some background checks on some individuals. And then he left. He was from Dallas. And he called me about 45 minutes later. I was in the office. He said, Ted, be careful when you leave, because when we got on the elevator, by the way, this was on Saturday, you had to go through the guard. When we got on the elevator, there were 2 men that got on the elevator on the floor above us. One of them had a sack in his hand. The other one had an open shirt in his back. And there was a gun in the sack, and I'm sure that the fellow with the hand under the open shirt in the pit of his back also had a gun. So be careful. I checked around, and I noticed that the escape door on my floor had been opened. Somebody came in through the escape door, fire escape door. I left. And he told me to come out to the Sportsman's Lodge. I'll take care of you. So I left and went out to the Sportsman's Lodge. Spent a week there. He paid the bill. And it's kind of eerie because I knew that I had a contract on me. And every time I'd hear somebody coming down the hall, I'd just wake up like that. Every time somebody walked down. I didn't get much sleep that week. And then I realized I had to leave Dallas, or had to leave Los Angeles for Dallas. I went to Dallas, and I went underground for about 6 months. And then F. Lee Bailey, the well-known criminal defense attorney, hired me. And I was on the road for him for about a year. Total of about 18 months I left. It was when I came back from this excursion, and I tried to keep my office going. I had 8 people working for me. It's when I came back that I started paying my own bill, and that I found out and learned about the Answer All telephone service that I mentioned earlier in this lecture. That I had an illegal telephone tap on me. So, and then on another occasion, divine intervention. I had a friend, elderly friend, his wife called me, said, Dennis is, when he gets up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, he falls down, I can't get him up, will you come over and spend a week with us, and if he falls down, I'll get you and you come pick him up. I said, sure, I will, naturally. This was Sir Dennis Kendall, by the way. He was a former member of the English Parliament. And a plant, I might mention. He was planning on me. He called me on a pretext one day. He said, Ted, I want you to come over and do some work. He gave me a check for $375. It was some nebulous work. He said, I want you to do this. And from then on, I was his, quote, best friend. He'd have me over for dinner and what have you. And I found out later that he was actually working for the other side. He was a friend of Freddie Kassab, who was the father-in-law of Jeffrey McDonald on the McDonald murder case. Freddie Kassab had taken up against Jeff, Dr. McDonald, and he was a former member of the Special Forces in, I think, Canadian Special Forces in Europe, and Sir Dennis Kendall knew him, and Sir Dennis Kendall was keeping track of me and the case on behalf of Freddie Kassab, Dr. McDonald's in-laws. So anyway, I went over, spent a week with Dennis and Peggy at night. I didn't go over there during the day. At the next week after that, my daughter and her husband had a trip to Northern California, and I told her I would house sit for her. So I went to her place for a week. So I was gone for 2 weeks. Now, prior to this 2-week period, I had a feeling I was under surveillance when I left work. Whenever I'd leave work. I was working in the valley, San Fernando Valley. And at that time, by the way, that was a period when I decided I had enough cops and robbers. I'm going to get out of this business. and I went into the export-import business with a fellow I thought was a friend. Long story short, we were in business for a year, didn't make one sale, and I lost my life savings, $181,000, by the way, every dime I ever made. And I haven't recovered since then. But anyway, I was working in the valley, and I'd go home. I had about a 15-mile run out to the house. And a couple times going out, I was pretty sure I had a surveillance on me. And one time when I was with Victor, he was the fellow I was in business with. He and Victor and his wife and his kid and I all went to a movie. We came back, the garage door had been wide open. The door from the garage into the house was wide open. And when we were at the movie, somebody got into the car and twisted the rearview mirror around just to let us know, one of the subliminal messages, just to let us know that somebody, they can get to us. That's one of their techniques that they use. And so anyway, so here I am. I didn't go home for 2 weeks. Victor took a trip to Argentina the week that I was at my daughter's. And Elena was his wife. And I called Elena. I said, look, Elena, on this one particular night, I said, I'll be home. My daughter's coming home tonight, and I will be home tonight for sure. I called her about 8 o'clock. My daughter came in. My daughter and I started watching a movie, and it was 11 o'clock, and I called Elena. I said, Elena, I'm not going to be coming in tonight after all. And that was about a 40-mile drive. So I didn't go home that night. Next morning, I went to work. Alina said, had a terrible experience last night. Right after you called at 11 o'clock, somebody came into the house. It was a triplex. And I tried to use the phone. I couldn't use the phone. And the dog was in the bedroom. She was on the 3rd floor. And the living room on the 1st floor, and there's a dining room kitchen on the 2nd floor. It was a step-up type. The dog went bananas. There was somebody downstairs. Her husband, of course, in Argentina. Said I'm coming home, I didn't come home. And there's somebody came in and sat in the living room from 11 o'clock until 2 o'clock. And the dog, and every once in a while he'd get up and walk back and forth, back and forth. The dog would go nuts. She closed the bedroom door on the 3rd floor, went to the telephone, didn't work. He'd gone in to the kitchen, taken the phone off the hook so she couldn't make a phone out. This was before cell phones, by the way. And that was it. I didn't go home that night. I called at 8 o'clock, said I'm coming home for sure. I know there was a tap on that line. That's why they hit up. They wanted to grab me. They were planning on grabbing me. And at 11 o'clock, I called and said I'm not coming. But in the meantime, they'd assembled their group, and they were on their way out to get me. Didn't work. Divine intervention. I didn't go home that night. I found out later through my informants that the man that came in and waited for me was a fellow named Bill Menser, who was a satanic contract killer, was because he's no longer, he's in jail now. And my friend Michael Riconoscuto and I, who I'll tell you a little more about Michael tonight in my lecture on terrorism. Michael Riconoscuto and I were responsible for putting him and 3 other individuals, all contract killers, in jail for life. So instead of Menser getting me, I was able to get him. God is my co-pilot, okay? Divine intervention. I didn't go home that night. Those are just some of the experiences that I've had. Granada Hills, Kelton, June 15th, 82, the Dead Red Roses and so forth. The Elevator, 1200 Glendon. Demons. Here about a year and a half ago, you'd think there's no demons? There's demons out there. Let me tell you something. I'm writing a check, $23. It's a bill. And I take the check, I write it out, take it, I start to put it in an envelope, it disappears on me. I looked all over. I couldn't find it anyplace. It disappeared. I don't know what happened to it. About the same time, I had a stand-up lamp, an upright lamp in my bedroom. The upright lamp falls over. No reason at all. Nobody in the bedroom. And I realized I had a demon in my midst right there. And I said immediately, in the name of Jesus Christ, get out of here. And I haven't seen him since, by the way. And he hadn't come around since, he or she, whatever it is. But about 3 or 4 days later, something said, Ted, go check that box under the front desk, in the front of my desk, under the everything. But that's where I would throw my receipts for the IRS. I pay my IRS taxes, believe me. That's one thing I do every year because I know if I don't, they're going to come after me. And so I went over and I went down about 10 layers of receipts, and here's that check. There's no way I put that check there. That rascal put that check over there, and God told me to go get it about 3 or 4 days later. Okay? So I just wanted to relay my personal experiences to you, divine intervention. My faith is very strong, very strong. I don't wear it on my arm, so to speak, but if anybody asks me about it, it's there. And like I say, God's my co-pilot, and thank God that he is. It's been a great talking to you folks, and thank you, and God bless you.